Welcome, everybody, to a quick take, hot take episode of the Total Soccer Show. My name is Taylor Rockwell. Here with me to talk about Mauricio Pochettino's latest 23-player roster is the man himself, Joe Lowry. Joe, not on the list. Once again, it has to be a disappointment, but at least you are here with me today.
You know, Taylor, this is the next best thing to appearing and making my very first U.S. men's national team appearance. All I can do is continue working, continue grinding. I feel like I've shown enough to the manager. He doesn't think that, and despite that disagreement that we have, I feel like we still have a good relationship and we're building towards something down the road.
That's a very, very good PR response, Joe.
Thank you.
Nice
the real response is I hate his guts, and he should have called me in. He called in a bunch of schmoes ahead of me. It's unreal.
Well, I hope that you accost him for that when he does his press conference here in a little bit. We are recording this Tuesday late morning, about a half an hour before Mauricio Pochettino does his presser to talk out his roster. So we don't yet have that info. We don't have any of those quotes. We will probably publish this after that press conference. So you can look forward to our more detailed roster breakdown with myself, Joe, and Graham tomorrow, where we will have some of those Pochettino responses. But this is his 23-player roster for the Concacaf Nations League semifinal match against Panama on March 20th, 7 p.m. at SoFi Stadium. The winner advancing to the final, where they will meet the winner of Mexico and Canada. The loser playing a third-place game that nobody will care about unless it's USA and Mexico in the third-place game.
In which case, tune in.
They will.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And maybe Canada. Who knows?
Yeah,
there's
we'll do a show either way, so definitely listen to that. We care about it a lot, and you actually do care about it some, I got to be honest. But anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about.
It's not. We're here to talk about the roster as it is. Joe, we got some things right when we tried to predict the roster. We got a few things wrong. I believe we got all of the goalkeepers correct.
Good for us.
No, you know what? I take that back. I did. I had Turner, Steph, Schulte. That is what it was.
Nicely done.
Joe, you had, I believe, Fries and Koken in there.
Classic. This had to have been, honestly, do not even remember predicting this whatsoever, but this had to have been what Joe wants to see, differing from what we were ever going to possibly see.
That might be. Maybe this
But
was,
good for you, Taylor. Good. Let's focus on you, man. That nailed it. 3 for 3. Victory lap. Impressive. It's going to be Matt Turner starting in goal for all these games.
I actually can't remember if this was the predicting the Nations League roster or if this was if the World Cup were tomorrow.
No, I found it in my notes. I had Matt Turner, Matt Fries, and Diego Koken. Next to Fries' name, I had parentheses probably be Stefan. Next to Koken's name, I had should be Schulte. So There we go. But still, I was wrong. You were right, and I give you props for that.
Well, I will give you props then for being mostly right in your breakdown of the defender pool because you correctly speculated that maybe we wouldn't have as many fullbacks as I thought we might. I thought we would have at least 4, so we would get some variety in there. Instead, we have the 3 for this one. We've got Jedi Robinson on the left. We've got Marlon Fossey, who can play both, but I think is primarily a right back. And we've got Joe Scally, who is primarily a right center back / right back. And then we've got 5 center backs, Joe. Any surprises there?
Honestly, no. I think this defense pool makes a lot of sense to me. So there is no Noah Kai Banks in this team. That is notable. I don't think it's a surprise, right? You look at the center backs. It is Chris Richards and Tim Ream. It's Mark McKenzie, who's been a Poch guy so far. It's CCV, and it's Trusty. That pool makes a lot of sense all the way across the board. And you mentioned the fullbacks already. It's going to be Scally starting at right back, and it's going to be Jedi starting at left back, right? So Gino Dest is back. He's played for PSV, but he's not fit enough that it makes any sense to bring him into this window whatsoever. And so the U.S. didn't. And it'll be Jedi on one side, it'll be Scally on the other. And I would imagine we're going to see Mark McKenzie and Tim Ream probably in the middle of that back line. But it's a center back pool that we know. It's a center back pool that features a lot of names with some upside, with some downside. Like this just kind of is the U.S. center back pool at the moment.
One thing I did say I wouldn't mind seeing, and I think you didn't feel like maybe was most likely or as likely, was the idea of having CCV and Austin Trusty start for the United States because they start together for Celtic pretty often. They are both in this roster, which I don't think either one of us was fully expecting. But I take your point, Joe, that largely it's kind of whichever center backs are fit and willing to accept the call. Maybe Banks didn't want to commit yet. Maybe he just was surplus to requirement right now. Either way, it is more or less the center back pool we thought it would be with maybe Trusty or CCV in place of Banks. The midfield, I think, also pretty much what we expected. We've got Tyler Adams. We've got Johnny Football. We've got Weston McKennie, Gio Reyna, Tanner Tessman, who you said was a lock. I said was maybe. You said for sure he will be there, and for sure he is there. And I believe you also had Diego Luna, Joe, and in that you were correct.
That does sound like me, calling players locks and predicting the future with 100% certainty and never wavering or having a high-pitched tone at the end.
I truly think it was because I used him as an example of somebody who maybe he's in there, probably not. Yeah. Who cares? And you were like, oh, he's definitely in there. You said it assertively and with informative analysis behind it. Yeah,
100% success rate, except at the goalkeeper and defense positions.
Otherwise, yes.
I mean, I love that Tanner Tessman's in this team. I think he brings something to this U.S. squad, and we saw that back in November with his ability to make those dynamic runs out of midfield to overload in the wide areas or to crash the box with his distribution. And I think he is getting better with Lyon, where he's getting faster in his speed of play. He's not perfect, and I don't think he's a drastically different player than the one that we saw 4 months ago or the one that we saw at the Olympics, frankly. But he's getting legit minutes for Lyon in big games, and that is progress, and we're seeing his game progress right along with it. This is the first time, Taylor, and there's a lot of juice in this midfield group, by the way. I'm stoked about Tessman. This is the first time that we're seeing Tyler Adams and Gio Reyna get called in under Mauricio Pochettino because they haven't been healthy. And that is, I think, big news, where Tyler Adams is a locked-in starter for this team when he's healthy, and he is, or at least we think that. I suppose we don't know for sure under Poch, but I would be shocked if that wasn't the case. And Gio Reyna is a super talented player, as I've made very clear over the years my thoughts on Gio Reyna. I think those two players make this team better, and we haven't gotten to see what they look like under Mauricio Pochettino. And then Diego Luna being in this group as well is super fun. Brendan Aronson, notably not in this group, is also not injured, to my knowledge. So this is Diego Luna raising his stock in Poch's estimations from his time in the January camp and from his play in MLS. And Brendan Aronson, who has been called in under Poch already, not getting that call. There's a ton of intrigue in this midfield group, and I think this is a really, really talented group of guys right now.
I think I had Gio Reyna listed as a forward, but I did have him in my roster. You had him as a midfielder, and here he is as a midfielder. Do you know who is listed as a forward, Joe?
Yunus Musah. Yunus Musah. Yeah. We know that Poch likes Yunus Musah on the wing, and maybe that's going to continue.
Yep, I would say it will. How much stock do you put into that when you have a player listed in a specific position group that we might not expect?
I don't know, man. A little, not like no stock, because we've seen it before with Yunus Musah and Mauricio Pochettino. Like, that's kind of all we've seen from Yunus Musah and Mauricio Pochettino. It's not quite true, but we've seen a lot of it where Musah's playing wide on that right side. And I think that Poch likes him in that spot. I think he likes that he brings good defensive work rate, is a useful ball progressor in early kind of build-up phases down that right side, and also likes other central options more than Yunus Musah. So I don't think that role maximizes Musah. But to be honest, Taylor, looking at this roster, I don't think Yunus Musah is starting either one of these games. When you think about how Christian Pulisic and Tim Weah are the only pure wingers in this team, I would imagine that it's going to be those two guys in the starting lineup. It's going to be one of the strikers, which we'll get to shortly, and then it's going to be 4 defenders and 3 midfielders. And I don't necessarily know if Musah starts over Cardoso or over McKennie or over Gio Reyna or over Tessman. And I think it's going to be Adams and McKennie in there somewhere, and that third player is probably not going to be Musah.
Yep. I would agree with that. And I think that also allows him to be the kind of super sub. Do you need someone to come on and play in the right wing, but maybe do some defensive work? That's Yunus Musah. Do you need someone to play centrally? That could be Yunus Musah. Even maybe potentially at fullback, you could bring him in if, kind of either way. If you're chasing the game, you could put him on there and have him be more attacking. If you're trying to see the game out, you could put him on there and have his work rate and kind of ability to be physical and then carry the ball forward help alleviate some pressure. So I think you're right. We're more likely to see him as a substitute option. You were also correct, Joe, in speculating that maybe we wouldn't get a ton of winger options in this one. I think we both kind of thought that would be the case, largely because there's a ton of injuries to the pool right now. There aren't as many effective options there. So instead, we basically get Christian Pulisic, Tim Weah, Yunus Musah probably as a deputy, and that leaves Patrick Agyemang, that leaves Josh Sargent, and Brian White, who I did not expect to be on this roster. He was probably the surprise inclusion for me overall. He definitely wasn't near my 23-player squad. He was in the honorable mentions, not even the immediate honorable mentions.
Yeah, I didn't have Brian White on my bingo card either for this roster, but it kind of makes sense in some ways when you look at his status in the pool, where you're missing Florian Balogun, you're missing Ricardo Pepi. Brian White was in that January camp, and so he's somebody that Poch has worked with before and is a very capable striker. He's not a guy who's going to get called in when everybody's healthy. This is almost certainly going to be more of a flash-in-the-pan thing for Brian White, and honestly, probably still for Patrick Agyemang as well, where you think about his status as being underneath Pepi and Balogun. But he's a fun player, Ajiman, and has a profile where Brian White is maybe a bit more similar to Josh Sargent, kind of jack of all trades, physical presences in the box where they can win stuff in the air, work hard defensively, are solid connectors. Ajiman is physically different. He's got another gear to his game in transition. He can be even a bit more of a target in the box because of his height. White, I think, is going to struggle to differentiate himself in this pool in a way that Ajiman won't, even if Brian White is the better player right now, and I think he is. But it's fun to see Josh Sargent in this team. It's obvious. It's maybe the most obvious pick given all of the injuries in this entire squad. He's going to start. At least I would imagine that he's going to start. Maybe Poch has a wild card that he's ready to play. But it's fun to see Sargent get another crack at this and to have another opportunity because I like him as a player. I like his game. And I think he's a good soccer player who is capable of leading the line for the U.S.
I would agree with all of that, and I would extend it a little bit further. I do think we should expect the U.S. to beat Panama, not trying to be cocky, not trying to dismiss an opponent, but that is an expectation we should have. So if we don't do that, I have some concerns right away. But if the United States beats Panama, if they get to the final, my assumption is that Josh Sargent starts both of those games. And if he doesn't, I almost see that as a conclusion we can draw, that if you bring in Josh Sargent, a player who's been in and out of the national team at various points, and he doesn't sort of make that role his own, given the injuries ahead of him or potentially ahead of him in the pecking order, if he's not able to take that opportunity and kind of cement at least further consideration, I would be concerned about him under Pochettino going forward.
Yeah, I think all of that is totally fair, and this is a huge window for Josh Sargent to show that he has something meaningful to add because the striker spot with those injuries is more up for grabs now than it's felt like it's been for a little bit of time. Taylor, can I take us back really quickly to that midfield group? Because I think that is the most fun part of this squad by a country mile. Because Tessman is such a fun player. I love that Gio Reyna's back in this team. But Diego Luna, to stick with him for just a second, he was a big snub from that Olympic roster, although big, it's not a huge deal. It wasn't a huge deal at the time. But Diego Luna was a snub from that Olympic roster. There have been discussions about maybe he will play for Mexico because he's eligible to play for Mexico. Now he's in yet another U.S. camp. He's one of the January camp guys to return. I love this because I think Diego Luna adds something different to this U.S. pool. Sort of similar in his own way to what I was talking about with Ajiman, where I don't think that Diego Luna is going to be starting big games to the U.S. in this World Cup cycle. I mean, we're so close to the end of it already. I don't think that that's on the cards for him. But Gio Reyna gives you another weapon. He gives you another club in your bag, where if you're trailing a goal late on, and past versions of the U.S. needed somebody to hit that final ball or needed somebody to like cause some problems for the defense in the final third, I don't think they had that player. I don't think the U.S. has had that kind of player for a really long time. And Diego Luna still has a lot of developing to do. He's still inconsistent. He still gets frustrated sometimes on the field. There's a lot of work for him to do to become the starter for the USMNT that I think is in his range. Like, that's possible for that to happen. But this is how you get there, is you get into national team camps with serious, stakes on the line, and you earn a few minutes off the bench here, and you earn a few minutes off the bench there, and you work hard in training, and you learn from one of the savvier coaches on the planet. I love this for Diego Luna. I love this choice from Pochettino. I think it makes so much sense to diversify this squad tactically and positional profile-wise ahead of the World Cup. Luna is just such a great fit to accomplish that goal, and I love that he's in this team.
I definitely do as well. I was really excited to see him in the January camp. We only see him start one of those games. I can't remember if it was injury or fitness, but basically the plan was for him to start both, and then there was a concern that maybe he couldn't make that happen.
Yeah, he got smacked in the nose, right? Was that? I don't remember which. Was that the first game? I was out of town for all this, so it's a bit fuzzy for me. He's still wearing the mask, man. Like he'll be wearing the mask if we see him in this camp. He hates it because everybody hates wearing those things, but it looks sick, so you gotta give him that.
But I think like that, the confidence of Diego Luna, he does not strike me as a player short on confidence. I told the story, I can't remember if it was weeks ago or months ago at this point, about like when I was a college kicker, trying to be a college kicker, and the coach like, who's going to go do this onside kick? And I said, I'll do my best. And he said, not you. Diego Luna seems like a guy who's like, I got this, no problem. And I think that is the type of player that Pochettino wants. I think he wants a player who has not quite irrational confidence, but strong self-belief and maybe strong team belief or collective belief at that. And I think that's Diego Luna. I think that's probably why he is in this team. He has the ability and he has the potential as well, as you've outlined really well there, Joe. But I think there's also probably an attitude and just sort of just a spirit, a competitive fight that you probably want if you're Mauricio Pochettino with the way he plays and the type of player he prefers. I think Diego Luna could very well be one of those.
Yeah.
Joe, we don't want to go too long on this, but I did want to ask you, we have the press conference looming. For people who are unfamiliar or less familiar with the way that works, generally it's a Zoom call. Pochettino will deliver, or the coach will deliver some kind of opening remarks. Oftentimes, some are briefer than others, basically. I would be surprised if he went particularly long in explaining his roster choices. Then they open it up to questions. And I feel like, not trying to play the world's smallest violin, we're always at kind of a disadvantage because I think when you're a reporter coming in, you have a story you're writing, you have a profile or a preview from a specific lens that you want to cover ahead of the games. And so there's always a question about a specific player in the roster or a specific approach or what have you. Then there's always going to be the opening questions about, like, why know this guy? Can you talk about this? What happened here? If you were going to get in line, if you're asking a question about this roster, Joe, what is that question going to be?
I am curious how Poch views the more pure attacking midfielders in this team. I don't know exactly how I would word this, but massaging the question in some way to get both Gio Reyna and Diego Luna into it, to hear Pochettino's thoughts on both of those players. Like, he hasn't had a chance to work with Gio Reyna with the national team. I mentioned that earlier. How does he view Gio in this team? What has he seen from him at Dortmund? Is he concerned at all about the fact that he is not a regular player over in Germany? That was like 4 questions in one, so that's not exactly how that would go.
But that's usually how it goes. Like,
this is true. There's like
a two-part question.
Two-part question. Yeah, 100%.
And the second part has nothing to do with the first part and is its own question. But I said it was 2 parts, so now you have to let me do it.
I try to avoid doing that. Maybe the way I would phrase it is, Mauricio, thanks for taking the time. Always got to lead with that. Thanks for taking the time to do this. I'm curious to hear your thoughts a little bit about Gio Reyna and how you view him fitting into this team, and Diego Luna as well, as 2 guys who can be maybe more attack-minded midfielders for this group. How do you see them fitting into this squad, and what do you hope to get from them in March? Something along those lines, where it really is 4 questions in one, but you just don't tell them that it's a 2-part question. That's the hack, is just leave it open-ended. I'm curious to see, because I don't think we have a great sense of how Poch wants to use Gio. I don't think we have a great sense of like what he's seen from Diego Luna maybe since January camp. So that's probably where I would go. Taylor, what do you think? Like, what stands out to you as the question that you most want to have answered from Pochettino for this roster ahead of those Nations League games?
I will answer that question, Joe. First, I just wanted to let you know I've done you a service. I have transcribed your question for you. Here you go. It's Mauricio, you're welcome for my question. How many goals will the U.S. score in the World Cup final in 2026 if it starts Gio Reyna and Diego Luna? There you go. That's your question.
Good.
But always important to lead with
word for word.
For my
Man,
presence.
That was good. Yeah. That was really good.
I think it will almost certainly be asked somewhat early on, but a question about dual nationals and dual national recruitment, there were several that could have been in this team, some more likely than others. And I would throw Richie Ledesma into that one, where he is waiting on a Mexican passport. We don't know what he's going to do if he is going to switch, but there's Luca Colaioccio in there. There's Henri Chase. There is Noah Kai Banks. There's Nathaniel Brown, I think, is also eligible. So I'd love to know what conversations have been had if they are sort of courting anybody. It doesn't seem like that's the thing we would get a very clear, specific answer on. I feel like we'd get some generalities and some vagaries, but it's still a question worth asking. Any of the omissions, Aronson probably most notably, and then I think probably asking some questions about Musah as a forward instead of a midfielder, and what he really values there, why he likes Musah there, and how he plans to make it work with Timothy Weah involved, or does he? I think that's the areas that I'm most interested in, and maybe also how the roster changes if there is a different look with Serginho Dest back in there, given that he's returned in a cameo appearance, but does seem like he'll be back on the pitch consistently sooner rather than later, but wasn't in the provisional roster, so can't be in this team. But I think that those are all things I would love to know a bit more about.
Yeah, all totally fair, Taylor. It feels like, and we kind of got to this, maybe unintentionally, or maybe this was your master plan all along. It feels like there are a lot of things to be intrigued about in this current squad. The striker situation, and a bit more on Yunus Musah and how he plays. And we still haven't seen a lot of the U.S.'s best players, period, under Pochettino. Where Pulisic doesn't make it all the way through, if memory serves, that very first November window. that Pochettino has, or October window, that Pochettino has. Same for McKennie. And then you get Gio and Tyler Adams back into this team.
Is that when we send everyone home before the game against Mexico?
Yes.
Like, cool.
Yes.
This is going to go well.
I think McKennie was already injured, and then he just didn't get the run, and Pulisic went home, and it was the whole thing. And then you toss in some of the fun new names in Luna and Tessman, who I'm kind of still counting in that category, and Ajiman. It's just a fun squad. Like, I'm kind of juiced for these games in a way that I didn't necessarily expect to be, even though we're already in a situation where every game matters at this point under Pochettino because there are just so few of them ahead of 2026. I'm stoked for this presser, and I'm stoked to talk way more about this tomorrow with you and with Graham, because I even think there's so much more that we haven't gotten into that we still can and will.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Joe. I agree with all of that, especially just that it's intriguing. It is an interesting roster. There's lots of little things to be both excited about and intrigued by. I think so often when you have a roster that has a debutant or a dual national called in, if Damian Downs, for example, had been in there, I think he's injured and was never likely to make it after that injury. But like, if you had him in there, that is going to be a focal point of the conversation. It is going to be like a main point of the conversation because you don't have any players like that. I think it opens it up more to the intricacies and vagaries and potential wrinkles of this roster, combined with aspects of having 5 center backs. How are we feeling about Matt Turner, who still isn't getting a ton of minutes? What does that midfield look like? What does the attack look like? I think there's just a ton to be excited about, to be intrigued by, and I look forward to breaking it all down in more detail tomorrow with you and Graham. For now, let's say this quick take, hot take is good to go. It is baked to an appropriate length, and now we are going to theoretically try to get it out before the press conference starts. We'll see how well that goes, Joe.
205 internal. 205 internal temp. We're good to go. Let's rock and roll.
Okay. All right, there we go. Rock and roll. Talk to y'all tomorrow. Bye-bye.